All right, this is a demonstration of our State of the Watersheds notebook. A notebook is a data science tool that uses cells of text and cells of computer code, written in this case in the Python programming language, to walk users through an analysis of data. And in this notebook, which is available at the link there, through the Google Colab platform and can be run by anyone with a Google account. In this notebook, we start by just providing a little bit of instruction on how to use it. It really can be as simple as pressing play on each cell of code. Although we do ask folks, as you'll see, to make some choices about which county, which place they want to focus on in their analysis. So this notebook is about the state of the watershed across the US, and in particular, how well the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System is being enforced, violations of that, and what it all means for water quality. So the first thing we do here is to install some sort of helper code that the notebook will draw on throughout to make the analysis run quicker and take up fewer lines of code. So I've already done that in this demonstration previously, but to give you a sense of what that would look like to run this notebook, I've gone ahead and clicked play. It's spun around, and then you see this little check mark here that tells you it's done, and you're ready to move on to the next cell of code, where you'll have an option to choose which state you want to look at. Once you select that, you'll run the next code. That will give you a choice of which county in that state you want to look at. So here we've selected Adams County in Colorado. Now, we are going to look at the watersheds that traverse Adams County, Colorado, and look at the facilities regulated under NPDES in that watershed. So we do that in this cell of code. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind here, some sort of technical issues. Some watersheds we aren't able to actually retrieve information for at this point. Part of that just has to do with differences between EPA's systems and USGS's systems. It's also very hard to map all of the facilities in very big watersheds. So actually what you're seeing here is most facilities, these orange circles, but not all of them. I think there's about 1,000 or 2,000 more in this very big watershed that encompasses much of exurban Denver. And so we can kind of get a sense for what these facilities are. So, you know, some sort of energy station. Okay, that one, not sure about. Trucking company here. And we can just take a close, here we have, you know, some other facilities and so on and so forth. Now, we also want to know or be able to compare what's going on nationally. So we here look up all of the permits under NPDES for the entire US and what parameter or pollutant is being regulated, how frequently those have to be analyzed, and to what level the permit is at. So just as an example here, so this permit, they have to be on the lookout for pH. They have to monitor that once a week, and you can look up these codes from an external source. And that pH level has to be less than or equal to 8.5. Okay, and that is enforceable, right? So if the pH is greater than 8.5, there's a potential violation. So here we just sort of summarize what this looks like across the country. You know, what are the biggest permits for? And it's for total suspended solids. You're monitoring that twice a month or once a week. And, you know, these are some of the mean and median values, but we have 78,000 permits for total suspended solids across the country. We might want to zoom in not just on these top 10, but for any specific substance. Here we've selected lead out of hundreds upon hundreds of different regulated substances here, some of which, are going to be similar to each other, but specifically total lead. And here we get the different ways that lead is measured, or specifically different frequencies. And one thing that I want to point out here is that we do also see some monitoring that is not enforceable. So, this ALR code is going to tell us, okay, there's 500 or so permits around the country where they've got to monitor for lead, but they're not on the hook for it. There's nothing enforceable behind any of the levels. All right, so then what does this look like in this specific watershed in Adams County that we are focused on? Well, again, total scented solids, really important. E. coli here as well, benzene. And we know that there's about 7,000 or so permits in that watershed. So the vast majority of them, on the hook for total scented solids. For lead in particular, we don't have any enforceable permits in that watershed around lead, but we do have some, about 40 or so facilities that do have to report on it. So EPA keeps track of facilities reported exceedances. So when facilities make these reports every week or every other week or whatever it is, they automatically look at whether that value reported by the facility is in excess of what the permit is. And so here we're looking at all of the exceedances for fiscal year 2022. And this is just a summary here of some of the top pollutants in excess. Of course, total scented solids, not a surprise here that it's the top, because we sorted this just by the number of exceedances, and we know it's the most frequently permitted one, so maybe not surprising it's the most exceeded. But the median percentage at which the values are reported above the permitted threshold are quite a lot, 60% over. And we see that pretty high numbers for all of these other substances as well. In our specific watershed, we get into some specific substances here as well. And if you exceed your permits at a certain, for a certain number of times over a certain time period, you do run the risk of getting a water quality violation. And in fact, exceeding your permit will get you a water quality violation, right? An effluent violation in particular. So here we look, across the country, what are those effluent violations looking like? And the way we measure that, I can get into this in more detail later, but the way we look at this is as a frequency or a rate. So, we've looked at the top 10 watersheds in years here, where in 2020, this watershed, there was one facility that accumulated 580 violations somehow, which means, you have a pretty high violation rate. Now, we're only able to look at that rate in terms of a sort of intensity. So, it's not out of all regulated facilities, it's out of those that have violations. So there might be 100 facilities in this watershed, but the way we're doing this calculation is out of the one that had the violations, how many violations did they have? And that gives us that rate. And the reason for that is historically, EPA doesn't keep track of how many facilities are regulated. Like, we don't know how many facilities were regulated in 2007. Or it's not easy to access that information. So we can't do it out of the whole. But, for the selected watershed that we're looking at, we can look at this over time to get that sort of like bad actor feel, where, we have in 2005, 250 or so violations per 100 facilities in violation. Basically, that means that every facility that is in violation or accumulates an F1 violation accumulates 2.5, right? So they're like routinely doing bad things. And that sort of dropped off over time. Whether that's a real thing or changes in reporting, we'd have to investigate further, at least in this watershed, let's say. We look at the top 10 watersheds nationwide. It's kind of hard to see on this map, but they are out west for the most part: Oklahoma, California, Nevada, Washington, Idaho. If we zoom back into our selected watershed and kind of try to get a sense of like who is causing these violations, well, here we map out the 100 facilities that have been in non-compliance over the past 13 quarters. So these are facilities that have, been deemed to be non-compliant. They've accumulated a lot of violations over the past 13 quarters. And there might be more than 100. We just look at the top 100. Now, of course, state and federal EPA are going to take different enforcement actions against facilities that are in violation and non-compliant. Whether they do so and to what extent they do so is an interesting question. So if we look at the enforcement rates nationwide, we see, this watershed here, we've got 227 different actions over the past 20 plus years against 9 different facilities. And that's kind of an indication of, how routinely bad some of these actors can be, as well as how diligent perhaps these agencies are. They're lobbying 227 different written orders and penalties and whatever it might be against just 9 different facilities, giving us this high rate. And if we look at where that's happening, we actually find that that's in North Carolina. In fact, nationwide, the top several in North Carolina. And of course, really what's at the core of all this concern about enforcement and compliance is water quality. What does this mean for the point source pollution effects on water quality? If we know that facilities are routinely out of compliance with their permits, if we know that there's a lot of permits to legally allow so much pollutants into the water as well, what does that mean for water quality? So looking at our specific watershed and drawing on the EPA's ATTAINS database of water degradation and watersheds, looking specifically at the ones that have been assessed, we get the following picture. So the darker the shade of purple here, the more degraded a sub-watershed in the overall big one in Adams County has been determined to be. Now, there's a lot of gaps here because those sub-watersheds haven't been assessed. If we look at the ones that have been assessed, we can see some hot spots of degradation. Now, linking that to specific point sources, well, we'd have to go back and look at those bad actors and look at potential non-point sources and whatever, but this starts to give us a clue of perhaps where that degradation is happening. So this is the State of the Watersheds notebook that gives us both nationwide and local trends on water quality, enforcement of water quality, legislation, and so on.